Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a level 90 strength build using the Cold Warped Axe. At plus 18, this weapon gets a B scaling in strength despite having the cold infusion, so it's pretty strong in terms of strength scaling even though it's split damage. And this gets even better at higher levels, so plus 25 does still get an A scaling in strength, which is great if you want to use it at meta levels. And then we'll also, on our offhand, have the Cold Highland Axe at plus 18, which we're not going to use too much. It doesn't do quite as much frost buildup, and it's mostly there because it buffs our roar attacks. We'll be running this build with 46 points into vigor, 25 into endurance, and then 50 into strength, which puts us pretty close to the hard cap of 80 when we two-hand our weapon. And then we'll be wearing the Tree Sentinel helm, the Knight's Cavalry armor and gauntlets, and then the Tree Sentinel greaves, and that gives us 87 poise with the Bulgo talisman. We'll also have Urchi's favor +2, the Roar medallion, and the Rotten Wing sword insignia. As for our physic, I'll be recommending the Thorny Crack tier as well as the Crimson Bubble tier. The Thorny Crack tier is a good choice because it makes your consecutive attacks grow stronger, which is useful for the true combo we get with the Barbaric Roar, Ash of War on the Warped Cold Axe. So Spiky Crack tier is another route that I definitely tried, and you can either buff charged attacks or consecutive attacks. I think those are the two different routes you could take, but I definitely ended up preferring the consecutive attacks because I found that the charging attacks were a little bit more difficult to land and that it was easier to just go for an uncharged heavy with Barbaric Roar. The moveset for this build is going to be not amazing, but definitely usable. So we have just a lot of sweeping attacks, and we also do have access to the dual axe moveset, which comes out in predominantly staggered attacks. I think almost every attack comes out staggered. Even the crouching attack, which oftentimes comes out together, is slightly staggered. So I would say the crouching attack with both the weapons is probably going to be your best, or jumping attacks where you're hoping to roll catch on maybe the second hit. But we're going to be using the two-handed moveset for the most part, especially because the strength scaling is going to be very solid for that. So we'll use the Barbaric War, Ash of War, and this will give us a unique heavy. So uncharged, it comes out pretty quick, and you get a lot of hyper armor. Fully charged, it comes out a little bit more slowly, but the hyper armor doesn't start until the charging is finished. So you're probably going to want to go for just the uncharged version. I found that much more consistent to land. Oftentimes I would get knocked out of the charging animation just by a stun lock from multiple enemies. And because this weapon has very little range, I found that you'd want to get this attack out as quickly as possible. You could stack poise or use a physic tier to boost your poise temporarily, but I think going for the successive attack route rather than the fully charged heavies associated with Barbaric Roar is going to be a little bit better. And then we do have the Beast Roar Ash of War in our offhand axe, which is going to be buffed by the Highland axe just because that buffs all roar attacks. And it's really nice when you just kind of pull that out at the end of a fight when you're, using these for a chase down or something, because you might have a hard time just roll catching them with the normal axe attacks. So I definitely found that nice to have on an offhand, but you could, vary that up if you have a different Ash of War that you'd prefer. That's everything that I wanted to say about the build and the strategies involved. I also wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who's subscribed lately. We got a whole bunch of new subscribers recently, and we did hit the goal of 1,000. So I'm particularly pumped about that. The channel growth is, starting to look fairly legitimate. And if you're new to the channel, I really wanted to thank you for joining. And if you've been here for a while, I really wanted to thank you for being here since the beginning. So yeah, that's all I got. Let's go ahead and jump into the invasions. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have a 3v1 against a group of gankers. Everybody's using Mimic Veil, and we are in the Lanedale area, so we need to kind of use the terrain to our advantage. The stair set was really helpful in terms of isolating single opponents and then being able to just kind of get out of the way, get them to chase me a little bit, and then have a quick way to escape when the pressure was being applied. So I'm trying to kind of bait them into attacks, and then I want to poise trade with them during the Barbaric Roar heavy attack. So you can see there, I got one hit off and got this first anchor user pretty low on health, and they decided not to heal, which I think was a bold move, and ended up taking some more damage and going down. So that ended up being a fairly effective strategy. None of them had a ton of health, which made my job definitely easier, especially if I was able to catch them in the true combo associated with Barbaric Roar. So you will note that Barbaric Roar is a 3-hit true combo, but in some cases you'll stun lock them with the Frost proc, and that will knock them back, and it can knock them out of the space for that true combo. So we'll keep an eye out for that throughout the duration of this invasion sequence. But yeah, we just kind of continue to apply pressure, use the staircase to our advantage to kind of switch around them, get behind their back, and maybe, like, you know, if they're going for momentum, especially with the spear attack in one direction, we can quickly pivot and get kind of behind them. So I try not to stay up here too long. I'm really focused on getting the Vike Spear Phantom because their health is low and they're not healing. So they kind of give me the space to go after the Vike Spear user, and while I did manage to guard break them once and didn't get the riposte, I was able to hit them with a jumping attack. And then me and the host just kind of dance around each other for a little while. They start using their shield a lot, and eventually I'm able to guard break them there just after they summoned in a new Phantom. So that ended up working out pretty well. I got to wave hello to the Phantom as they were incoming, and it was an anchor user from the beginning, which is fairly typical for a ganking situation. But that ended up working in my favor, and I think using the stairs there was a big part of why that was successful. Next up we have a 2v1, and this involves a lot of poking weapons. So we have the dual cross Naginatas as well as a Vike Spear paired with a Moog Spear. So definitely something to worry about. Those weapons together are all pretty good counters to a short-ranged weapon like the Warped Axe, but I try to bait them into an area with a little bit of PvE because I don't think just running around in that area is going to really do me any favors, and I'm able to get a backstab on the heavy attack from the running attack rather from the dual great spear user, and that is a move that definitely opens you up to backstabs. There can be a little bit hard to get there. I definitely went for them but wasn't able to grab it, so the window is not huge, but if you are close to them and kind of roll to avoid the dual running attack, you definitely can grab a backstab with some consistency. And then I was able to just kind of take them out with my backswing, and that worked out definitely in my favor. And once it's a one-on-one situation, especially when there's PvE around, I felt like I was, you know, shifting the momentum to be in my favor. And even though they do have cross Naginatas, they're not using them really the way they need to for them to be most effective. They're playing a little bit more defensively, especially now that their partner is gone, and the defensive play with a weapon like that is really not going to work out in their favor. It allows me to kind of get continuous pressure and then just avoid most of their fairly easily telegraphed attacks. The ideal situation for them would be a chase down situation where they can kind of continuously push me in one direction and get off their attacks, but with me being able to stay so close to them, I'm able to really utilize the power of the Warped Axe and not have to worry too much about the lack of range. So I'm trying to pick my moments for sure and just avoid their attacks, but having them backpedaling is definitely the way I'd prefer it. And I also know that I can win out on some poise trades with their attacks in some cases, especially with the hyper armor. There I go for a poise backstab, it doesn't work out, but definitely worth the attempt in a situation where I felt fairly comfortable. And then I just use a bleed bolus to get rid of any bleed buildup. I'm fairly comfortable with the amount of heals that I have, but I felt like it was worth it. And here you can see they just, I think they really wanted to get out of this situation, and I get them pretty low on health and then weapon swap over to Beast's Roar just to finish them off. And I found that to be a really useful Ash of War to have on my offhand weapon, since going for chase downs with the Warped Axe is not very enjoyable. There's not a great move that comes out quick enough with enough range to really roll catch consistently. So, it's definitely possible to get some roll catch timing down, but it's not the easiest thing. Next up we have a 3v1, and we have a Vike Spear user, a Moonlight Greatsword user, and then somebody with fist weapons. And I opt to go after the Vike Spear user first. I'm able to catch them in a hyper armor trade using the Barbaric Roar's hyper armor, which is going to be really a theme of the strategy for this build. If you can get the attack animation started, then you'll be in a great spot to really poise most attacks, and especially if you can stun lock people, which is, you're almost guaranteed to do. you'll get the 3-hit true combo, and it will end up working out really well in your favor as long as you don't die while you're kind of performing all 3 of those swings, which can definitely happen. You're stuck in that animation for a little while, so even if you are, killing a phantom or something, you could be getting hit by magic from somebody else. So that's just something to be aware of. Eventually, I was able to do another poise trade with the Barbaric Roar Hyper Armor, and that worked out as a way to kill the second phantom there. And now it's just a one-on-one situation with the Moonlight Greatsword user. And that Ash of War, or heavy attack rather, once the weapon is buffed, is very strong and can definitely do a lot of damage. So it's always important to just kind of respect that and really roll it as much as you can. Here I try to get up close and personal, and I'm able to get a roll catch just with a light attack there. So that ended up working out in my favor, but Moonlight Greatsword is always just something to be wary of, especially in smaller spaces. Next up we have a 2v1, and here you can see just the patch 1.07 buff the poise damage associated with the first part of Loretta's Slash, and there you can kind of see that come into play where it did stun lock me for both parts. So I was trying to be a little bit wary of that and just kind of reset things to neutral after that initial attack and just try to get a feel for the play style of the Scythe user, because they definitely were pretty strong for a co-opper, at least, for the average co-opper that you see. I think they were varying up their moveset, and here you can see their weapon swapping. So I think the bow was a bad choice and was ultimately their downfall here. I'm able to get them pretty low health, and once they're pretty low health, I switch over to the Highland Axe with Beast's Roar, and I feel like I'm in a good spot to hit them eventually. And there you can see I'm able to dodge Taker's Flame and get the Beast's Roar off to finish them. So once it's a one-on-one situation, it's not so bad. And there you can see a little latency with the attack that I received there, but I'm able to get the full combo off. And the full combo is going to frequently be enough to frost proc somebody. Here they didn't get quite frost proc, but one more hit, and that was enough to take care of the rest of their health. So that's definitely one of the reasons that I recommend using Barbaric Roar on this weapon. Not only is it a true combo, it's going to be building up Frostbite throughout the duration of the 3 hits. So, definitely something nice there. And especially when the status proc buildup has been reduced for two-handing weapons. Or dual wielding weapons, sorry. That's going to be a great way to apply Frost a little bit more quickly, since that dual wielded Frost proc or whatever status proc you're using is no longer quite as strong. So I definitely enjoyed it and found it to be a very consistent way to Frost people. You'll also note that I changed up the types of consumables that I used. So in some invasions I used sleep pots. Some invasions I used volcano pots, and this one I used rope volcano pots as well, and I also had frost pots in some. I found frost pots not to really be super necessary because the axe was pretty consistent at delivering the frost buildup, but the volcano pots and stuff were really nice just because you could undo the frost proc, and then you'd get the you could reapply it with the axe. So it was kind of nice to have an ability to just kind of get the frost proc repeatedly without having to wait for the cooldown of that particular status buildup. So here I use a couple volcano pots just because I know they're going to have to turn around. There's a fog wall that you can't really see until you get close to it there. And so that does a little bit of chip damage, and I was also just not sure if they were frost procced at that point, so I wanted to make sure that I could frost proc them again. So definitely a nice option there with pots. I think there's a lot of variations you can use, and there I'm able to frost proc them again, and that contributes definitely to getting rid of their HP for the kill. So just a quick note on consumables. I think there's a lot of different options when you use this build, but the volcano pots ended up being some of my favorite. The sleep pots are also very nice because they do reduce your opponent's FP. So if you have somebody spamming a lot of spells or using a lot of Ashes of War, you can get rid of a chunk of their FP if you do manage to sleep them. So we'll see more of that later throughout the course of these invasions. But this next one was a 2v1, and there you can just see Barbaric Roar's true combo, kind of working as expected. It's really important with this weapon to stay really close to your opponents and be comfortable going in for poise trades. I think that was something that I struggled with early on when I was trying out this weapon for the first time, is just not going for enough trades, and also charging the heavy attack associated with Barbaric Roar. And in the beginning I mentioned that I ended up preferring to use the uncharged version, and that's because of the hyper armor that you get. I think it's really important to just know that you have the potential to be stun locked out of your heavy attack if you don't, or if you go for the fully charged version. You're not going to get the same hyper armor as early as if you just go for the uncharged version. So that ended up being my recommendation, and just for something with short range like this, it's really important to be able to get that hyper armor early, or have a really high poise build, or use something like the tier that boosts your poise. So it's very doable to use the charged version, but it's more difficult in my opinion, and not optimal for this level of poise that we have. So next up we have a 2v1, and this is going to involve somebody casting spells and then somebody else that I was able to take care of pretty quickly. It was just kind of making sure that I didn't die from the amount of damage the spell user was doing. And then you can see there, just kind of go for the dual axe attack. I felt it nice to be able to mix that up a little bit and just utilize the dual wield stagger attacks a little bit more often. So here we do have a really nice moment where I'm able to get most of the full combo off on this person that's been slept, and that's one of the reasons I enjoyed the sleep pots, is it leaves them open for the full combo, and they won't really be able to get out of that animation unless you get backstabbed or something like I did there, but I found that to be fairly informative at least. Another thing to know about sleep pots is that it's harder to sleep people once you've already done it. So like the second sleep is going to require more build up than the first would, and so on. So that's just something to be aware of. You can see the first one slept them pretty quickly, but the next subsequent pots didn't. Eventually I am able to take care of that phantom, and I start going for the host. Here you can see maybe more sleep pot usage than is necessary. I get a couple hits off with the beginning of the Barbaric Roar true combo, but in some cases the axe swing will miss your opponent, so that's a way that they can get out of the true combo as well, as especially if you're on like different height terrain, they may not get hit by some of the axe swings, and they'll be able to kind of roll out of it. So it is a true combo, especially on flat ground, but there are a couple nuances to it that may result in it feeling like it's not. So just be aware of that, especially if you're using the status proc like Bleed or Frost, which can knock the opponent's character model just kind of back a little bit. So here you kind of can begin seeing the use of the sleep pots. I really go for quite a few of them because I was just kind of experimenting and trying the different types of status build up. And here we do end up getting the sleep animation just as I'm able to get the true combo off. So I think that true combo would have finished them regardless if they had been slept or not, but it didn't hurt to get that off and just kind of demonstrate the utility of sleep pots in that instance. Next up we have a 2v1, and here you can really just see how quickly you're able to frost somebody. So I get one hit where they have a shield up, and that stance breaks them, and then you get the next hit, which is part of the riposte. It's a 2-hit riposte, which some weapons are, and that allows me to get a second bit of frost buildup, and then I do the riposte, and that's the third, and it frostbites them. So very quick frostbites, especially if you don't have high resistances to it on your armor like that person did, since they were wearing some pretty light armor. So just kind of a demonstration of that there. And then here we can see the kind of way I'm dealing with, or maybe not dealing with, the dual hammer build. So that's a great one that kind of counters this weapon in some ways, because I'm not going to poise break my opponent if they're mid attack. They're going to have too much hyper armor, and they're likely going to poise break me in almost all instances. So it's, I might not even win out on a trade if they go for a jumping attack. So I ended up going for a backstab, which I think is a good way to kind of mix up the way you approach a dual hammer user when you have a really short range weapon that doesn't do as much poise damage as your opponent. So that ended up working out, and I was able to kind of move on to the next one here, where I go for, I just kind of assess the situation and then drop a volcano pot behind me in this doorway, and that allows me to apply my buffs. That's something I definitely recommend, is using volcano pots just to kind of, I guess it would be zoning your opponent. You keep them in a space that you want them to be in so that you can do something. So using volcano pots in doorways is always a great way to just kind of discourage them from following you and give yourself a moment to do whatever you need to do, whether it's like use a bolus or apply some buffs. It's just a pretty good strategy I've found that I like to employ a lot. So we do have the Phantom switch over to another axe, and I thought that was kind of cool, just kind of mirroring my build a little bit. I definitely appreciate when people do that, but I was able to kind of take them out with some of the Barbaric Roar heavy attacks, and then it's a one-on-one situation. And here you can see I'm just staying really aggressive with this opponent, just kind of up close and personal in their face. I found that to be another good strategy with a weapon like this that has such short range, is maybe not necessarily attack every time with you're in range, just be up close and personal to them. And if they start attacking you, hopefully you'll have enough poise to win out on a trade just by reaction. Next up we have a 2v1, and these people were taunter tonguing. I invaded them again later with a co-invader, but it ended pretty fast and wasn't that notable, so I didn't include it. But here we can kind of just see some of the frustration associated with the warped axe and chase downs. I was like chasing them down pretty consistently, trying to manage my stamina, also try to avoid any attacks coming in from the Bloodhound Fang user. And I also start switching up to the two-handed moveset, and there I almost get the kill. I think there's a little bit of latency. I'm surprised that didn't stun lock them, and I start going for fan daggers, but they're able to heal. And then I get just a little bit frustrated with the Bloodhound Fang user, so I switch over to a parry shield and just kind of go for the riposte. Sometimes that happens where somebody might be just kind of chipping away at you from behind as you're chasing somebody else down, and so if you quickly switch your attention to the other person, it might catch them off guard and just be a good way to, you know, apply some aggression and either kill them or at least take care of some of their health. I wasn't sure if my riposte would kill them. Normally I'd kill the Phantom first, but that opportunity kind of arose and I felt that it was necessary to just kind of go for that parry and see what happens. So next up we have a 2v1, and this is going to be a lot of magic spam, particularly involving those frozen meatballs. Not sure exactly what that spell is called, but that's kind of what they look like to me. And that's going to be a theme from these two players, and then there's also going to be a blue that comes in and also sends a lot of those meatballs my way. So the Phantom here is switching over to Rivers of Blood, which I thought was definitely a nice change. I know that that's going to keep them in an animation for a little while, which means that I can poise trade with the heavy attack of Barbaric Roar. So you saw me kind of go for that earlier. They kind of get off of my trail a little bit here, so I'm able to get some quick attacks in, and definitely I'm winning these trades when it comes to the amount of damage they're doing with River of Blood, but I am trying to contend with the magic spam that I'm getting. And I ultimately am able to get them chased down with the fan daggers, but here you can just see a lot of these spells coming my way. I thought it was kind of funny when the blue showed up and did the exact same thing the Phantom was doing, but here we kind of reset to neutral. Everybody stops sending the rocks my way, and I start chasing after this blue a little bit. Their playstyle is a little bit odd. I'm not sure if they don't have much health or what, but they aren't really being the aggressor that they should be. They might have gone for a weapon swap there, I'm not sure, but they weren't really protecting their host the way they should. So here you can see again that I'm really staying aggressive and just applying some pressure in ways that are more just kind of like walking and running based. So just staying really close to your opponent can I think it can psych them out and they can start panic rolling a little bit more, especially if you do things like crouch or put the guard up for your weapon for a second. They can think that's an attack coming in. So that's something that I think is important for a short range weapon. And here they're pretty low on health, so I switch over to the axe with Beast Drawer. I'm not able to hit them with it, but I am able to get a quick Estus punish just with the jumping attack, which is going to be your best bet in most cases. And now I'm using the dual axe moveset, which I definitely liked. If I wasn't going for such high strength scaling, I probably would have incorporated the dual axe moveset a little bit more. But the Warped Axe gets, pretty good strength scaling, so it makes more sense to two-hand it, in my opinion. But here we can kind of see the utility of having the staggered attacks during the duration of the chase down. And even if I don't stun lock them or hit them with both, then I'm able to get them sometimes. And then there you can see some very strange lag. Many more spells coming my way than there should be, but it doesn't end up being a huge factor in terms of my ability to chase down the blue, and I managed to get the kill there. So at this point, I'm just going for the host, and I'm not too worried. They've got Moonveil, but their damage output isn't massive. There, I get the partial parry, which means I get part of carrying retaliation, get some chip damage, and then stay aggressive and manage to take out that opponent. So that ended up working out well. There was a lot of that particular rock spam there, but it wasn't so bad. And next up we have it's a series of 1v1. So it starts out with just this dual curved sword user, and it's definitely something to worry about. They've got poison buildup as well as bleed buildup. I believe they're using the scavenger curved swords, which have innate bleed buildup. So they're definitely optimized to poison proc me. You can tell by the mushroom crown that their AR is going to go up for that. So I'm trying not to get poison procced. I almost managed to get the Beast Roar finish on them, but the tree gets in the way, so there's definitely a heads-up move of them to wait until they got over the tree branch before going for the heal there. But next we can see the Barbaric Roar full combo, just kind of working out as expected, and then switching over to Beast Roar, I'm able to kind of punish that animation that they went into after Sword Dance. So I think that was probably the correct way to deal with that, and it's also kind of nice having two roar-based attacks. I think it throws off your opponent because they don't know if you're going to go for Barbaric Roar or Beast Roar, depending on, if you have the same weapon or if they see you weapon swapping, they will know. But I think, a lot of this is kind of based off just like sight and sound, and they might not have the presence of mind to really take into account the fact that you're, weapon swapping there. So I'm able to chase down the host and then just manage to get the kill. Just, again, staying aggressive, staying up close and personal is pretty effective in that moment. So next up we have two wizards, and I believe they both have Moonveil. So I'm trying to take care of the Phantom as quickly as possible. You can see Moonveil does like close to half my health, and they go for Stars of Ruin, which does maybe a third. So I'm definitely worried about them, but they are a little bit too aggressive, don't appreciate the fact that I can be aggressive too, and don't heal, which means I'm able to kind of finish them off. And then here you can see the host is like rolling quite a bit, and we're also on uneven terrain, which ends up mattering a little bit just in my ability to hit with the axe. So the axe has kind of a strange hitbox when it comes to the diagonal slashes that you do with it, and it can make fighting on uneven terrain a little bit more difficult. You're more likely to miss swings just because the hitbox will go over your opponent's head or something. So something to be aware of. I can say if you are able to push for being on a more flat terrain, then that would be probably to your advantage, but not always wholly necessary, just something that may allow you to land more hits. So I'm kind of continuing the chase down. They're definitely a little bit more slippery than I would like. I'm also trying to allow them to hit me a little bit so I can get a poise trade in and use the hyper armor of the heavy attack, but they are playing defensively. So here we can see I am able to get the 3 combo, and I go for a Frost Pot since they aren't frostbitten, and that almost kills them, and then I'm a little late on the Estus Punish. So they definitely are on their back foot. That spell was absolutely not the right move. The animation takes way too long. And here you can see me continuously trying to get the finish, but I go for a crouching attack, which was probably the right move because that animation is kind of a slam down rather than a slash across, which meant that the variable terrain was not going to end up being a factor. So I think it took me a little while to realize that that was probably going to be a better way to attack in that environment, but once I did, I was able to kind of land the finish there. So definitely a good way to go in that scenario. Next up we have a 2v1, and we have a lot of status procs building up, but I am able to take care of the Phantom a little bit early on in the fight before either the Frostbite or well, I guess I've already been frostbitten, but the bleed buildup didn't get to me. So here I should definitely back off and use some boluses, so I do manage to get rid of the Bloodlust buildup, I think it would have been smarter as well to get rid of the Frostbite, just because that does increase the amount of damage that you're taking, and I definitely have the time and space for it. So since the opponent wasn't using a Frostbite weapon, I felt like the pressure to use that Bolus wasn't totally there, but yeah, I think, you know, in hindsight, upon review, using a Bolus just pretty much to get rid of any status, if you have time and space for it, is probably the way to go, especially one like Frostbite where you have the build-up. And then here I just thought it was kind of funny, I was able to knock them off with the axe, and they just kind of fell down that hole. So next up we have a 3v1, and this one was pretty long and kind of intense. I'm not sure if I enjoyed it or not, but it ended up working out in the end. So we have a lot of magic use, and I believe there's one user that's got a Moonlight Greatsword that just does a ton of damage. So here I'm going for this one mage that I think is kind of the weakest link. That's something I definitely try to do early on in the invasion, is if I can damage everybody a little bit, I can see what percentage of health goes down. And if it's a big percentage from a small damaging object, then I know that they probably have the least health out of anybody, and they make sense to be kind of the first target, I would say. Obviously, you're not always going to have the opportunity to go for somebody with the lowest amount of health, or you're not always going to have the opportunity to see, you know, how much health everybody has, but it's definitely a good thing if you can identify early on who is going to be a good target, and then who's like probably the most likely to die first. So I continue to kind of, you know, reset to neutral, back off, and look for an opportunity to jump in here. I noticed that they are using a lot of Moonveil, so that has the you do have the ability to parry that somewhat consistently. So I went for a parry attempt there a little while ago and ended up missing it, but I was able to get 2 hits in on one of the Phantoms. So that ends up working out in my favor, and then I switch back to the Highland Axe and perform another Barbaric Roar just to boost my AR and have the ability to get the true combo in. So between Moonveil and Moonlight Greatsword, my weapon is really not optimal. The true combo that I'd like to land requires me not getting stun locked out of it, which can happen from the Frostbite proc for sure that comes with the Moonlight Greatsword, and just, you know, anybody having 2 high-powered projectiles is going to be difficult to deal with. So here we can see a big chunk of my health goes down when I get hit by that. I'm kind of resetting again. And here I was definitely struggling a little bit. I was hoping to isolate the host, but then the Phantom comes back in. I need to heal again. So definitely felt on my back foot in this scenario, and was just kind of a little bit concerned whether or not I'd be able to finish off the host at all, or the Phantom as well. So I throw a sleep pot here, and that was kind of just a hope that they might get hit by it. It was kind of a, I don't know, more of a hope toss. You know, they weren't in the ideal position to get hit by it, but it would have been nice, I think, just because of the FP damage it would have done to them. So a good opportunity there, but didn't manage to pull it off. And there I get 1 attack in on the Phantom. I'm trying to continue to apply pressure, but I know that the host is coming in with the Moonveil, so I back down a little bit. And here I would say I was pretty close to, you know, beginning a chase down on the Phantom. They still haven't healed, which I definitely like to see. They also aren't frostbitten, so there we go. I do get a frostbite hit right there. But then the host manages to apply a decent amount of pressure and just kind of get me to back off on the Phantom. I'm not able to finish them off. So that was probably my best hope at getting that Phantom. And here it's like pretty dire. A hunter just got summoned. I'm either out of heals or only have 1 left. I kind of go for a hail parry there, which just kind of means you parry when all hope is lost. And I finally decide, you know, staying in the spot that I'm in is not working, and that would be something I would say is part of my play style that I don't recommend, and something that is probably problematic in terms of how I play, is just staying in the same spot. I think it's maybe like a pride thing or something that I would just like to manage to kill all 3 people with no help from PvE, but sometimes it's absolutely necessary to get PvE involved, and the earlier you can do it, the more help you'll get and the more likely you'll be to succeed. So I try not to do it too often, but sometimes I think I need to just say enough is enough. I'm not winning this with these sets of parameters against these people's skill levels, so PvE would be the way to go. So that moment was pretty nice with the backstab, giving me iframes to not get hit by the incoming spell. And here I just kind of begin to apply more pressure with the jar cannon. The jar cannon is actually doing pretty good work in terms of damage on the phantom. And then the host has actually wrapped around and started coming up the tree branch to chase me. And this is where PvE gets involved, and was just kind of why the decision for them to follow me was definitely a bad one, and the decision for me to jump down here and kind of regroup and get PvE involved was such a good one. So yeah, this one worked out mostly because of PvE. I think I got one slash in there, and then you can see the amount of damage the Moonlight Greatsword does just with one hit. So wasn't able to get the full phantom, 3 kills in that invasion, which definitely is something that works for me, but it was, overall just one that I think I learned something from, and hopefully you did too, just in terms of how to approach situations like that and when to kind of call it quits when things are not working your way. And by calling it quits, I mean getting PvE involved, not actually like severing out or something. So next up we have just a 1v1, and this is going to be the last invasion of the showcase. This player and I fought for a long time, and we had kind of an interesting finish to the fight. If you want to watch or just skip ahead, but I'm going to let this one play out and just kind of summarize how I felt about this weapon in general. So axes, not great. The scaling you get from strength is cool, especially when you can have it infused with another status proc. So strength scaling on it would probably be slightly more optimal, but you are able to pretty quickly proc frost, especially with Barbaric Roar. So I definitely appreciated that, and I would just say the range on the whole axe class is a little bit frustrating to use. You aren't always going to have great opportunities in multiple opponent scenarios to really do what you want to do. And I definitely found it difficult to apply pressure in the ways that I wanted to, especially if it was a 3v1 situation, or like you could get the Barbaric Roar true combo and it would be going great, but then somebody would come in with dual Colossal Swords or something and just completely demolish you because you're stuck in an animation for so long. So having the short range and the long animation attacks with kind of the most powerful aspect of the build is a little bit frustrating. Something more optimal you could do is use something like Horlu's Earthshaker, just something that has a big AoE and you're not really suffering from the range of the Warped Axe. But Horlu's Earthshaker I felt was better earlier on before everybody knew about it or recognized it so frequently. I think there was kind of a sweet spot period of time where nobody would really know what was going on when you went for Horlu's Earthshaker, and you could get off the first attack at least, or both attacks. But now I find that it's a little bit more difficult to use, and somebody in a group is more likely to know that they can just kind of jump it and land a heavy on you. So it's a pretty high risk, high reward situation at this point, in my opinion. But there are definitely different Ashes of War you can use with this setup. You don't have to frost infuse it. It can be more powerful than the way that I set it up, but I thought this was probably the most interesting way to use it, and I think I learned something about the axe class in general just by using it this way. So I really enjoyed it. I would be interested in seeing axes potentially buffed, maybe like faster speed, or in the DLC if we could get one with slightly longer range. That would be pretty nice. The poise damage is also somewhat lacking, so you could use Cragblade with it or something, but it's in the same poise class as straight swords, which to me doesn't make a ton of sense because the attack speed is slower. And if it's supposed to be like a heavier object, I think having a little bit more poise damage would be logical in my opinion. So yeah, that's everything that I wanted to say about the showcase, but I hope this encourages you to give the axe class a try. Know that it's not going to be the best weapon class, but it is interesting, and I had a lot of fun with it. as always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate everybody's support. And if you do have any particular builds that you'd like to see, I'm always happy to see those in the comments, and they're definitely nice for just, kind of getting a feel for what people are interested in. So yeah, if you want to see something, definitely let me know. That's all I got, and I hope you have a good one.